back down and shut your trap. It's time for
Keeping It Sports with M3.
Are you ready?
Are you ready?
Well, I'll need some beer.
Are you ready?
You have to ask me nicely.
Come on now, don't be bashful.
Are you ready? Are you ready for
Place for the best sports talk and news surrounding each league.
I can prove it with my usual flawless logic.
Hey, man, this time I'm going to do it my way.
What's your name again?
And now, here's your host, M3, Mike Rosansky. Coming to you from Cherry Hill, New Jersey. It's time for Keeping It Sports with M3, powered by the Connecticut School of Broadcasting. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm, of course, Mike M3 Rosansky, coming to you on this Monday, the 4th day of March. Hope you all had a great weekend. Hope you're all off to a great start to your week, whatever it is you may be doing at this time, and however you may be either watching this podcast live on Facebook or listening to the podcast version later on. I appreciate you tuning in. As always, a lot of things on my mind this week. Give you some thoughts on the history made over the weekend with LeBron James passing the 40,000 point mark in NBA, first player in NBA history to do that. Give you some thoughts, of course, on all of the nonsense that went down in the last week with my New York Jets and how they continue to just annoy the living crap out of me, this time in a new fashion that I didn't even think they were capable of. Also mix in a lot more across the NBA, some baseball thoughts as well. But we're going to start with basketball this week, as probably the happiest people in the world for the month of February to be over are the New York Knicks and their fan base. Because to say the month of February was a downward tilt for the Knicks, a month that they would like to forget, would be an understatement. When you consider they were coming off of the high of highs, at least regular season perspective, of being the best team in the NBA in the month of January. 14-2, looking like a juggernaut, had rolled off 8 or 9 straight victories to close off the month. They made a trade for OG Anunoby, who was a perfect fit for this team. But then the injury bug started to kick in. Really, it started with that game back on January 27th, when in the final couple of minutes, Julius Randle dislocated his shoulder. But from there, it was kind of one domino after another. You've had Anunoby out for about a month now with this elbow situation that he's been dealing with. And the weird thing about that is, up until last week, they really weren't giving us updates until finally they said, all right, the swelling has calmed down. He's starting to shoot the basketball. But still, you're figuring, oh, that's about 3 weeks until he takes the court again. That's about 3 weeks until he's a viable option for this team as a player. You mix in that, not having Randle for the amount of time they've had. I think it's been about 20 games now that they've been without Julius Randle. Add in the fact that Hardenstein is clearly playing with some sort of issue, having to battle through this Achilles tendonitis. You've been without Mitchell Robinson since December. You had an injury scare with DiVincenzo missing some time right before the All-Star break. And then what has happened in the last week? The one player you could not afford to lose. It was like last night, for every Knicks fan, their season flashed before their eyes. Last night was a cringe-worthy moment for the Knicks. As a minute into the game, you lose Jalen Brunson. At the time, you thought, oh my God, this guy's not going to play again this year. Because initially it seemed benign, just collides knees with a player on the Cavaliers. He's able to run around, but then comes up lame a couple seconds later after a jump shot. When he needed to be helped back to the locker room, watching that, I'm like, oh God, how long is this guy going to be out? Is he done for the season? Because they always say the non-contact injuries are the worst. And I say non-contact injury because when he initially collided knees, you figured, okay, a slight little hobble. It wasn't until after the jump shot that you really started to see an issue there. You really started to see a problem. And even with all of the injuries the Knicks have had, this is the Knicks guy. This is the Knicks lead star. This is the Knicks best player. You lose Jalen Brunson, you could pretty much say goodbye to the season. You could pretty much say goodbye to any hope of having a viable run here after all of the success that the Knicks had put together early on, after all of the goodwill the Knicks had put together early on. Because after that month of January, we started to talk about weird stuff. We started to talk about, really dreaming, really having your eyes on bigger destinations. We were talking about the Knicks possibly being the 2 seed, possibly having home court advantage through the playoffs up until the Eastern Conference Finals against the Boston Celtics, and then you take your best crack at it. But some of these injuries you've clearly seen have started to pile up when you consider, even before Brunson's injury last night, he was losing a bit of effectiveness, with teams realizing, all right, no Randall, no Anunoby, nobody as the second or third option here. We can just force the ball out of Brunson's hands and force the likes of Josh Hart or DiVincenzo to beat us. And DiVincenzo, I give him a lot of credit. He's been an awesome signing for this team. He's picked up at times for them when they've needed a lift, when they've needed that guy to step forward and be that new second option after Brunson. But he's not consistently used to that. When you take a guy out of a spot that they're comfortable in, sometimes they're not ready for the spotlight. And sometimes when they start facing stiffer competition, that's when it starts to come back at them. That's when you get a little bit of a hot streak, but when that hot streak calms down, you see, oh, this is the player that they truly are, if that makes sense. You could argue a couple of things here. You could argue the point and say that these guys having these injuries, possibly a good thing, because none of them are lower leg injuries. None of them, for Randall and Anunoby in their cases, are things that are going to be taking a lot of tread off of the tires here. So they'll be fresh when they come back. But they still need to come back. It's not like they're going to just parachute back in and be right back to what they were before. They need game time. They're coming off of significant periods of time of not playing basketball, of not shooting the basketball in an actual game. It's one thing you can have all the 5-on-5 practices, all the layup drills, all the shoot-arounds you want. But you got to see them in actual game action, actual game speed. And you worry about the rust. How much time are they going to have to wear off that rust, especially in the case of Randall, because by the time he comes back, it's going to be at least 2 months since he's last played. Add on top of that shoulder in all likelihood is going to need off-season surgery. You're not going to have a 100% Julius Randle when he comes back. So there's that to worry about. Also to worry about is these guys gelling together. They fit so well. There was a flow, there was a vibe with this team before these injuries. They got to actually play together and get some game time in together. You can't just have them plop back in, say, a game or two before the playoffs and everything be hunky-dory. That's why, in the case of Anunoby, you hope that this supposed 3-week timeline that they said last week is true. And, 2 weeks from tonight, we're talking about Anunoby being back in the next lineup. You're hoping that in the not too distant future, it's Randall as well. You hope Randall gets 4 or 5 games of game action in before you get to the postseason. The good thing is it does sound like they're going to get Mitchell Robinson back within the next week. So that should take some pressure off of Hartenstein, especially with him battling this Achilles tendonitis issue he's dealt with for a while now. But it's got to be a bummer for Knicks fans. As I said, a month ago, or a little bit over a month ago, it was like a party atmosphere at Madison Square Garden. The Knicks were not just winning games, they were kicking teams' asses night after night. They were looking like a true championship contender. And now you watch them and you're wondering, are they not only going to be able to hold on to the 4 seed where they've got a depleted 76ers team just a half game back behind them and still no timeline on when you're going to see Joel Embiid play for them. But they're going to be able to avoid falling down to the play-in, because you look at that 7 spot right now, it's the Miami Heat, who are only a game and a half behind them, and the Heat have been one of the better teams in the league over the last month. They've started to catch fire recently, especially since the Terry Rozier trade. So this Knicks team on a season that was so fun for them, that looks so promising, they've got a lot of questions going forward for the remaining of this season. Can they get these players back healthy? Can they get enough game time together amongst this group? Are they going to be able to not just stay in a top 4 spot, but avoid the play-in? The play-in, I think, would be the last thing you want. It would be a disappointment for this team at this point if they had to settle for the play-in. But all of this that we're talking about could have been for naught last night if there was a worse outcome for Jalen Brunson. And I'm not one of these people that is going to kill Tom Thibodeau for the minutes that he has played Josh Hart recently, or DiVincenzo, or gonna be screaming and hollering saying, oh, why are you playing Jalen Brunson 40 minutes a night? Look at what he has. Last night they went into that game with 9 eligible players. They were totally depleted. They were looking like a wreck team out there with how you saw the emptiness on that Knicks bench. They are missing a bunch of bodies right now, and they're very fortunate to have beaten that Cavaliers team last night. For one, the Cavs didn't have Donovan Mitchell, so I guess you could say Brunson leaving early kind of evened the playing field a little bit. But you credit that team, you credit the pun unintended, the heart by Josh Hart, the heart and will of DiVincenzo. Hell, even somebody like Miles McBride, who doesn't get a lot of run, doesn't get a lot of playing time, but Tom Thibodeau stuck with him and rode him last night when he caught on a hot streak and helped keep this team not just alive in the game, but leading throughout. Once again, showing that the Cleveland Cavaliers might be a bit of a fraudulent team. So, I know in the past, I've been the one to get on Thibs saying that, he needs to lengthen the rotation. But right now, he's just doing the best he can with what he's got. And for this Knicks team, they have got to kind of just do the best they can until they get some of these horses back. The thing that does help you is you've got a 4-game homestand coming up here. You're going up against the Hawks without Trae Young. Then you've got the Magic on Friday night. You've also got the 76ers in a rarity of back-to-back home games at the end of the week heading into next week. So there is that helping you out. Plus, remember, still no Joel Embiid. But the Knicks, I know that the easy thing here is to say tread water. But with what they still have, if these guys have anything in the tank, thankfully for their sake, they have a day off and there's no back-to-backs here in the upcoming future. Hopefully they can win at least 3 or 4 of these games before they go out on what's going to be a extremely difficult 4-game West Coast trip where you're going to be seeing the Kings, going to go play the Warriors, and finish that up with the Nuggets before coming back to play the little brother Brooklyn Nets. You're almost at a loss of words when it comes to the Knicks right now, but this is why a month like what happened in January truly helps you. Because it built you up enough space, it builds you up enough where if there is a fallback, or if you did have a slippage because of these injuries, where it wouldn't completely kill you. But inside, emotionally, it's got to be killing you as a Knicks fan, just when you think about what this season could have been. And you hope that there's still a chance for this season to be that. But it's going to take these guys coming back and getting game time together, being Randall, Anunoby, and Brunson, who you were very fortunate that you avoided the worst possible outcome. All right, going to take my first break of the podcast, but I got plenty left to go here, plenty of things left I want to talk about this week, give you some thoughts on the history made by LeBron James over the weekend, give you some thoughts on my New York Jets, mix in some baseball as well. So a lot to get me through about the next 40 minutes or so here. Glad you could join me once again this week. And as I tell you all each and every single week at this time, please sit back, relax, put your feet up in front of you if you're able to, and continue keeping it sports with M3.
I'll be back.
I wondered a couple of weeks ago what the level of urgency or the sense of urgency that the Milwaukee Bucks have. And I wonder if there's been any renewed sense of urgency in their minds if you read the interview that Dame Lillard did with Sports Illustrated last week, in which he talks about how hard of a transition it's been for him, moving from Portland all the way till Milwaukee after being in Portland for the last decade plus, being away from his family, really having no social life, which you somewhat commend for a pro athlete when you consider how easy it is for trouble to sometimes find some of these guys, or trouble to sometimes cause a guy to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. But this is Damian Lillard we're talking about here, one of the best people in the NBA, one of the best people in the sports world. There's never really been anything of possible negative notation attached to his name. The only thing people questioned was if he was too loyal to the Portland Trailblazers to concern himself about better chances of winning a championship, because it became clear that his time there had come to an end and it was better for him and the organization to move on. But remember, he's got his family out there. He's made so many friends over the years out there. And when you hear that his life these days is go to practice, go home, watch boxing, play video games, and that's about it unless it's game day, kind of a boring life, kind of a boring way to live. And you wonder if at some point, if the Milwaukee Bucks don't win a championship in the next year or so, is he going to try and force his way out? Is he going to say to himself, listen, I got no loyalties to the Milwaukee Bucks. I got no reason to want to stay here long term. Get me the hell out of here. Now, the Bucks have won 5 in a row, but they still remain a good distance behind the Boston Celtics, who, ladies and gentlemen, the Boston Celtics are not just winning games. The Boston Celtics are beating the living crap out of people on a night in, night out basis, including yesterday demolishing the Golden State Warriors in as dominant a fashion as I've probably ever seen in a regular season game. And I've seen scrub teams get destroyed and be down by 30, 35 points at halftime. Hell, my Brooklyn Nets lost by 50 to this team just a couple of weeks ago and were trailing by more points than they had scored in the first half. But for a team like the Golden State Warriors to go to Boston and get demolished like that was saying something. Now, you could say, oh, it's the final game of a East Coast trip for the Warriors before they go home. Maybe some guys had checked out. But what's a killer is when your main star has absolutely nothing. It's also a killer when the Warriors go into the game with one of the dumbest game plans that you can ever imagine. I mean, you decide that, oh, we're going to let Jalen Brown do whatever the hell he wants, not even guard him, and focus on everybody else. Jalen Brown was the key in the Celtics building such a lead, really setting a tone here, because it was 21-21 early on until the Celtics went on a run to destroy the Warriors and have them benching everybody by halftime. Hell, nobody played a starter in the second half of this game. It was so lopsided. But Jalen Brown scored 19 in the second quarter, highlighted by those 3 straight three-pointers he had in about a minute span there that pretty much put this game to bed very early. And while you don't want to get too much on the Warriors because the Warriors had won 11 out of 13, had gotten the hot here since they made the decision to move Klay Thompson to the bench, part of the issue here is what you're seeing with the Warriors. They can't hang with these big-time teams. They can't beat these top teams. You saw it a week ago where it looked like they had the Nuggets dead to rights in the first half, and Jokic and Murray and company pretty much laughed that off at halftime and blew right by them. Now, yesterday, the Celtics see them come into town and absolutely demolish them. We're sitting here in a world that I'm not sure the NBA ever wanted to see. I'm not sure that the commissioner, Adam Silver, ever thought he'd be seeing. Where if you look at it right now, if the regular season came to an end today, in the Western Conference, you would have a play-in format of the Suns playing the Mavericks and the Warriors playing the Lakers. Meaning that you would have Kevin Durant versus Luka Doncic, or expanded Durant, Booker, and Beal possibly, versus Luka and Kyrie to decide who's the 7th seed. And the loser of that having to play Curry or LeBron in a win-or-go-home matchup to be the 8th seed. I mean, that just adds intrigue to the season. It also shows the coming of age of some of these young teams, as we talked about last week with the Thunder and the Timberwolves, and how the Nuggets still remain amongst the top dogs in the sport. But back more to the Boston Celtics. It is clear the Eastern Conference is a one-team race. It's the Celtics up here and everyone all the way down here. Even the Bucks, who, as I said, have gotten hot recently, are still 8.5 games behind them. The key for them is just health. Just go into the postseason with everything available to them. I know that they didn't have Kristaps Porzingis, but that seemed like it was more of kind of a maintenance thing to protect him from himself. He hasn't really had any issues or too many things to cause him to miss significant chunks of time this year. But this Boston Celtic team, you didn't think that they could get better after getting to the finals last year, but with the additions that they've made, adding Porzingis and Holiday to replace Robert Williams and Marcus Smart, this team has been just electric to watch. The only question I really have about them is if they are shooting too many three-point shots. But they've put the rest of the league on notice, especially the rest of the Eastern Conference on notice. You know, LeBron James made some comments last week expressing, I don't know if you want to call it outrage or discontent or concern about the attention provided on Bronny being removed from ESPN's 2024 mock draft. He had been originally coming into this year projected as a top 15 pick in the draft, but then after the unfortunate heart concern that he had last summer, combined with the fact that he hasn't exactly lit up the stat sheets at USC this year, and in all likelihood, they are not going to be making any postseason appearances beyond the Pac-12 tournament, LeBron came out on X and said the following, quote, "Can y'all please just let the kid be a kid and enjoy college basketball? If you don't know, he doesn't care about what a mock draft says. He just works. He earned, not given. Let's talk real basketball, people." End quote. Since then, LeBron's deleted it. Maybe someone talked to him and said, "Oh, that's not the best look in the world," or maybe it was just an emotional take by him. But LeBron does deserve a significant chunk of the blame here when it comes to all the attention that is provided on Bronny. Now, I give LeBron a lot of credit. He, at least by my point of view, at least from what I'm seeing from afar, is an excellent father toward his children. No doubt about it. All of his kids seem like they're growing into very well-respectable human beings. They're still very young, all still in their teen years, but all of them seem like they have a good head on their shoulder. And LeBron's son, Bronny, looks like he's someone that really works hard at this. Doesn't just fall back on the idea of, "Oh, I'm LeBron James's son." But when you have the fact that his kids are so publicly seen, and they're at every one of these milestone moments that he has had, the fact that last year there was some thoughts about retirement by LeBron after they got swept by the Nuggets before he quickly brushed those aside and once again brought up the idea of eventually playing with Bronny, whether it be against him or on the same team as him. He continuously mentions all the time that his father wasn't there for him, so he wants to be a great role model for his kids, unlike what he grew up with. And then being the fact that he has the same name as his father, his legal name is LeBron James Jr. He just doesn't like to call him Jr., refers to him as Bronny. The second that kid picks up a basketball, of course there's going to be pressure. Of course there's going to be attention drawn on this kid. It would happen with any big-time athlete, any legendary figure in sports. The second that their son or daughter picks up a basketball or picks up whatever it is in that same profession that their father or mother was doing, there was going to be pressure on them. There was going to be the comparison. There was going to be the thought of, "Oh, is this the second coming?" So LeBron, while I can understand him wanting to defend his son and saying people are being too critical, he does deserve a decent size of the blame for all of this. But rather than being concerned about the on-the-court stuff for his son, the Lakers have got to start being more concerned about their own on-the-court business. Because right now, while they're not in true danger of falling out of even just the play-in, they're in 10th spot right now. Right now, if the season ended, they'd be playing a road game against the Golden State Warriors for the right to see who can play either the Suns or the Mavericks to just get the 8th seed. Not something that you want for a near 40-year-old LeBron James to be doing. Not something you want Anthony Davis, who we know is made out of paper mache, to be doing. And Anthony Davis annoys the living crap out of me. Anthony Davis, to me, at times is one of the biggest wastes of talent in this sport. Because he's been raved about, marveled about as one of the best players in this sport, one of the most talented players in the sport. But time and time again, when it comes to these challenges of the other big men in the sport, he comes up flat, especially when it comes to going up against Nikola Jokic. Now, I said last week that I view Nikola Jokic as the most dominant big man that this sport has had since Shaquille O'Neal. And I stand by that. But when you consider that you've got LeBron matching Jamal Murray point for point, when you know that you're not going to be able to stop Jokic, you want to win a game like that on Saturday night, a game that's important for not just building some momentum toward moving up in the standings, but building some positive vibes for your team. You've got to be able to cancel out Jokic. You're not going to stop him, but for him to go out there and put up 35 points and you just sell for 17 and be nowhere in the picture every time Jokic is making a shot is unacceptable. That was a game that the Lakers had the lead in the first half. That was a game that the Lakers seemed to have momentum going, but then seemingly disappeared, seemingly were nowhere to be found in that second half after LeBron James scored 40,000 points. And listen, it's a remarkable moment for LeBron. It's just another thing to put on what has been a remarkable career, has been a remarkable career, not just for the NBA, but in all the sports. Something that, as I've said time and time again, we're going to greatly miss this man when his time comes to an end playing basketball. But every time he's had one of these moments, his teams have lost. Every time he's had one of these crowning achievements, his team has come up seemingly flat after that. Whether it be on Saturday night reaching 40,000 points, or last year passing Kareem for the most points in NBA history. There's just something that comes over this Lakers team that they just, I don't know whether you want to call it over-celebrate LeBron's achievements or just can't stay on task after he has these defining moments and are seemingly ruining whatever time he has left as a Laker. You want to be able to celebrate this stuff. You want to be able to view this and say, oh, what an awesome moment it is. But then you come away and saying, oh yeah, we lost the game. It's different from when Kobe was late in his career, and Kobe would have moments because you knew those Laker teams around him absolutely sucked. You saw that Kobe was deteriorating in talent. But you watch LeBron, there hasn't been any deterioration. There hasn't been any step back. There hasn't been any fall back from what he has been or what he has shown us over the years. He doesn't play as many games as he used to do, but it's still the dominant LeBron James. But the Lakers are wasting this time. They're wasting these years of LeBron James' career and wasting these celebratory moments. So much so, to get back to the present day of what Saturday night meant to them beyond the 40,000th point, these next 10 games that they had coming up, 8 of the 10 are at home. All but one of them is against a playoff contender, that being the Hawks on March 18th. And in these 10 games that got coming up between now and March 26th, You have no back-to-backs. 8 games of those 10 are at home, and 3 of the teams you're playing, the Thunder tonight, the Kings coming up on March 13th, and then the Hawks on March 18th, those teams are playing the second half of a back-to-back. And why that 10-game stretch I bring up is important to them, because after that they start a 6-game road trip in which you're going to have 2 back-to-backs between March 26th and April 3rd. You wanted this to be the time you start to make some hay and avoid being in that 9-10 play-in spot. Because I don't think altogether the Lakers are going to be able to avoid being in the play-in. What they're going to have to avoid is being in that 9-10 game and putting extra taxing on LeBron James and Anthony Davis.
I'll be back.
As we know, over the years, there's always been that, I don't know if you want to call it demon or cloud, that has hung over my New York Jets in the AFC East. For almost 20 years, it was Tom Brady and the New England Patriots. And once Tom left there, I'm like, all right, we finally have a shot. But that new demon or new cloud hanging over us suddenly began to emerge, suddenly decided to stick their head out. And it was in the last possible spot, I would imagine, up in Orchard Park, New York, with the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills, who have run the East for the last 4 years now, have been the dominant team, and not just been the dominant team in the division, but become one of the standout teams and organizations in the NFL. The one thing that has eluded them in that time and in their franchise's history is reaching the Super Bowl and winning it. And Sean McDermott last week, in an interview he did with The Athletic, said that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when they win the Lombardi Trophy. That is the relentless pursuit. And let's face it, Sean McDermott has turned that organization around completely when it comes to the attitude, it comes to the mindset. He deserves a lot of credit when you consider what he was facing, the odds he was facing. That team had not made the postseason in 17 straight years until he arrived in 2017. They've been there every year with the exception of Allen's rookie year. They've won the last 4 AFC East titles, and they've had some chaos to deal with in that time. They went to the AFC Championship game in the pandemic season, but fell short to the Kansas City Chiefs. Then you have a game against the Kansas City Chiefs where it looked like it was their time to shine. They're 13 seconds away, and Mahomes and Kelsey break their heart, forcing overtime. With the way the rules were at that time, you knew that it was whoever won the coin toss was going to win that game. And on top of it, you had a 2022 season where they dealt with a mass shooting up in a Buffalo supermarket. One of the co-owners suffered cardiac arrest. They had a punter accused of participating in a gang rape, Matt Ariza, who has since reemerged in the league. And to top it all off, you had the near death of DeMar Hamlin. Hell, he pretty much died on the field, and they brought him back to life. And on top of that, they had to play then 3 road games in a 12-day span because of a deadly snowstorm that took place in Buffalo this past season. So they have really been through the ringer. They have really been through a lot as an organization. I give McDermott a lot of credit for what he has done. And it's further proof for the Jets that if you bring in the right guy, if you bring in the right coach, it doesn't matter whether he's offensive or defensive minded, you can get the job done. Sean McDermott wasn't an offensive whiz kid. He wasn't one of these guys like McVay or Shanahan. He was on the defensive side of the ball. But what has he done? He's put the right people on his coaching staff. He's been able to game manage rather than just focus on one side of the ball. Something that maybe the New York Jets need to learn. It's not about what background the guy has, whether he's offensive, defensive, special teams coach. It's about, can he control his personnel? Can he bring in the right people to be on his coaching staff and watch over the entire team, not just focus on one given part, and make sure that they can get each part of the team right, not be dominant in one area and lacking in another. And you see the same thing down in Baltimore with John Harbaugh. John Harbaugh was a special teams coach, and he's been one of the most excellent coaches in this sport for the last 15 years. Now, you add on top of that now the fact that the Jets not only can't get the coach right, but they are continuously the butt of everybody's joke. They are everybody's punching bag. And recently, the two that have come out treating them as a punching bag are Dion Dawkins and Mecole Hardman. Dion Dawkins did an interview on a place called Vlad TV recently and talked about, remember there was that incident after the Jets and the Bills played in Buffalo back in November where him and Michael Clemens got into an altercation heading back to the locker rooms, with Clemens chasing after Dawkins, shouting at him. Even saw the video that surfaced since with Clemens cursing off fans in the stands. Well, Dawkins provided some more with that, talking about the Jets, saying, quote, "I hate them. All of them, bro. When it comes to sports, there are people that play the sport because they love the sport, and then there are people that play the sport to just try to be cool. I feel like they play the sport to try to be cool. They are a bunch of dudes that just want to take pictures on Instagram. That's whack," end quote. And that's a pretty damning statement. That is pretty rough to say. He would compliment Quinnen Williams in his comments, but since players led by Sauce Gardner have come out in responses with their love for football, and if anything, you guys kind of just bought into the bait that he threw out there. You kind of just hook, line, and sinker grasped onto what he was saying and showed that maybe he was right. Maybe you are all just a bunch of Instagram guys that want to look cool on social media. Now, Dawkins does come off as a bit of a fool in his own right when, if you watch a video of the interview, he's sitting there with his shirt off, showing how truly humongous he is and how many tattoos he has. That kind of hypocritical if you're calling someone else out for wanting to just be an attention seeker. But it once again brings to light how the Jets are a rudderless ship, how the Jets are just a bunch of individuals rather than an actual team. Then he would get more into the back and forth between him and Michael Clemens, saying that Michael Clemens was talking trash to Josh Allen during timeouts. It led to Dawkins wanting to enforce his physical will on Clemens later in that game, including on a running play, throwing him on the ground and then belly flopping on him that got a unnecessary roughness penalty. I've said this before, Michael Clemens is more of a pain in the ass than he's worth. He's not good enough as a player to talk as much shit as he does during games, whether it be saying F you or you suck to the fans in Buffalo or the way he acts. But when you have a player who's a successful player, a legitimate top tier player at their craft in Dawkins talking crap about you, saying that, oh, you only care about the spotlight, not about the actual sport, it is pretty damning. Then what's also damning is the comments by Mecole Hardman that came out later in the week when he was on a podcast hosted by Ryan Clark called The Pivot. And Hardman was critical of the New York Jets culture, also detailed his issues with the team. And I had a problem the entire time he was here with the way he was used, the lack of usage by this coaching staff, and how you have one of the fastest players in this league, and he's seemingly only used as a backup option on special teams when really he should have been your number 2 or 3 wide receiver. He should have been out there with Garrett Wilson and Alan Lazard. He shouldn't have been taking the back seat to the likes of Randall Cobb or anyone else. Now, he did get beaten out for some playing time by some undrafted rookies at a training camp, but he shouldn't have been behind Randall Cobb from the start as the special teams returner. And while his comments come off as damning toward the Jets when it comes to his usage, you also got to look at his comments as far as being damning to himself when he talks about how he pretty much quit on the Jets by week 4. And then he's doing things such as possibly texting Brett Veach, the Chiefs general manager, and Chiefs quarterback Patrick Mahomes, saying, "Come and get me." Like, how can he and the Chiefs be allowed to get away with that? Isn't that, I don't know, tampering? I thought you're not supposed to have contact with front office executives of other teams. Or maybe they're viewing it as, oh, it's him reaching out with the text. We don't know if Brett Veach responded or not. Or maybe it's just the classic case of the NFL protecting their golden child, just like they did for years with the Patriots. They're now doing the same with the Kansas City Chiefs. But those comments also hinting at the fact that he was giving the game plan away of the Jets to both the Kansas City Chiefs in week 4 and then in week 6 when they were playing the Eagles, because he's got a lot of former college teammates from the Georgia Bulldogs on the Eagles. even if that's not true, the fact that that is even possibly hinted, even if that's possibly out there, not the best view for this guy when he's going back into free agency this year, even though he's coming off the high of highs of catching the game-winning touchdown pass in overtime. Teams are going to view him now and say, oh, can we trust this guy? Is this a guy that we really want part of our organization? Because if he's not 100% happy 100% of the time, maybe he tries to bail on us and screw us and force his way back to the Chiefs, just like he did to the New York Jets. But even with all of that, this once again goes to show how frustrating it is to be a Jet fan. How we're always the butt of everyone's joke. We're always the guy that everyone likes to kick around when we're down. And even when the Lions, the Browns were bad, they weren't laughed at and mocked to this degree as the New York Jets. Some of it they've earned, some of it you could argue is taken too far. But as a Jet fan, it leaves me frustrated, leaves me hoping and praying for better things, but at the same time saying to myself, same old Jets, and questioning why we can't ever have nice things.
I'll be back.
If you're a New York Met fan today, you are sitting there possibly cursing off one name. And it's no one on the active roster. It's no one active in your organization. That man would be none other than Bronny Van Wagenen, the former general manager of the New York Mets, who 4 years ago made what I felt was one of the dumber, short-sighted moves, at least in my lifetime, of following the Mets, by letting Zack Wheeler leave as a free agent. And at the time, he said, he wasn't paying a guy off of a good year and a half. Because remember, Zack Wheeler had really started to emerge in the 2018 and 2019 seasons, heading into his free agency. Really missed a lot of time in 2017, but then in 18 and 19 exploded upon the scene, started to show all of the promise, all of why he was considered the top prospect in the Mets minor league organization at one point, someone that they were so anxious to get for Carlos Beltran. But Van Wagenen just let him walk out the door, didn't even really make him an offer. He would go sign with the Philadelphia Phillies for 5 years at $118 million. Something that when you see some of these contracts that pitchers are signing these days, especially when you look at what Carlos Rodon got from the Yankees, or when you see Robbie Ray's deal with originally the Mariners, now the Giants, or the deals that other big-time pitchers are getting, like Yamamoto just got from the Dodgers. It felt like chump change at the time. I'm saying to myself, I remember saying at the time that this was a deal the Mets would regret. This was a guy that they should not have let walk out the door. And we think back years ago to when all of those young pitchers came up. And I said it at the time, I'll say it again. After watching DeGrom explode upon the scene, that I thought Wheeler was going to be the next best guy amongst them, that Matt Harvey was going to eventually move on from the Mets really quickly, and he came and went like a comet. He seemingly flamed out, had some off-the-field issues that he had to deal with. And Noah Syndergaard was just a hothead that cared about throwing the ball 100 miles an hour every single pitch. And we really haven't seen much of him in the big leagues. Hell, he's still trying to get a job. He's still out there as a free agent and even got DFA'd at one point last year. Meanwhile, Wheeler has turned himself into one of the best pitchers in baseball, has been dominant in his 4 years with the Phillies, has more than a strikeout per inning, led the leagues in innings pitched in 2021, is a Gold Glove caliber player at his position. Yeah, he missed 2 years of time in 15 and 16 due to Tommy John. But since then, he's been a workhorse. He's been a model of consistency and has only gotten better with age. And now today, the Phillies have decided they would like that marriage to continue beyond this year. They decided, you know what, Zack Wheeler? This is not your walk year. You're not going to be a free agent and join that humongous class of free agent pitchers alongside guys like Corbin Burns next year. No, we're going to lock you up. And they gave him a very well-deserved 3-year extension worth $126 million, meaning he's going to be right there alongside the likes of Scherzer, Verlander, and Garrett Cole as one of the 3 or 4 highest paid pitchers in the sport. And got to say, very well-deserved and a job well done by Dave Dombrowski getting that deal done. And Met fans have got to just be saying, this could have been us, but we had a stupid GM in Brodie Van Wagenen. Hey, what do you know? Second week in a row, a member of the Boras 5 has been scratched off of the free agency list, as this weekend it was finally Matt Chapman that decided to join the party, as he got a 3-year deal for $54 million with the San Francisco Giants, in which there will be opt-outs after each of the first 2 years of this contract. But if he plays the deal through, he has a signing bonus of $2 million this year. His base salary will be $16 million. There's a player option for next year at $17 million with a $2 million buyout. Then he's got a player option for $18 million in 2026, a $3 million buyout. And the deal includes a $20 million mutual option for 2027 that has a $1 million buyout on that. So in total, this could possibly turn into a 4-year deal for $73 million. Now, I doubt these reports out there that the Toronto Blue Jays were offering him a 6-year deal for 9 figures. Because if you're a guy like Matt Chapman and you see that, you've got to jump at that. Yes, he's one of the best defensive third baseman, maybe even the best defensive third baseman in all of baseball. He's ranked first amongst all players at third in defensive runs saved and third in outs above average since 2018. A little analytics there for you people, huh? Didn't think I would pull that out in this podcast today. But he's always been kind of a very streaky player when it comes to his offense, especially last year. He was the best hitter in baseball in the month of April, hit .380, and then was a .205 hitter for the rest of the year, kind of flatlined after that. And they said he had a lot of trouble dealing with fastballs. But this is a good deal for the San Francisco Giants, a team that is trying to build themselves around their pitching staff. Doesn't have a lot of sluggers in it. Doesn't have that one true big impact bat. You want to make sure you're solid defensively all around the field. You want to make sure that your pitchers know that when they give up a hit or have a ground ball somewhere, that their guys are going to scoop it up and not going to have to get more outs than they were already dealing with. Now the question becomes, what happens with the rest of these Boras, I guess you now call them the Boras 3, as these guys are still sitting out there without deals. Maybe JD Martinez is looking at the contract that Soler got from the Giants earlier this season or earlier this offseason. But you have to remember, Jorge Soler is a little bit younger than JD Martinez. JD Martinez is 36, 37 years old. Soler is still only 32. So a team's going to look at it and say, oh, we got no problem giving this guy a 3-year contract. We have no problem paying this guy $14 million a year on a multi-year deal. Although JD Martinez is more proven, people are going to look at that age number. The two people that continue to be out of their mind, though, are Jordan Montgomery and Blake Snell. And Blake Snell should have just taken the deal from the Yankees. Now he's sitting there heading into spring training looking like a total dope, looking like that guy as a Cy Young Award winner that may not even have a seat at the table when the season starts. Jordan Montgomery, I understand this being his first crack at the can, possibly his only crack at it, but he might want to sign a 2-year kind of deal, sign one of these kind of contracts, just like Chapman and Bellinger have signed recently, and just make sure that he's in someone's camp, because it's March 3rd, people. The season starts on March 28th. At this point, neither one of these guys are going to be ready for the start of the season. See, JD Martinez could sign somewhere today or tomorrow, and he'll get the requisite number of at-bats in spring training to be ready to be someone's DH on opening day. There's no chance in hell that Montgomery or Snell are going to be ready for opening day. It doesn't matter how many bullpen sessions they throw at that little makeshift workout facility that Scott Boras has set up for them. These guys, unfortunately, are facing the bad right now of what it is to be a Scott Boras client, because they tried to seek too high of a deal, got burned by it, and now are in spring training as everyone is getting built up and prepared for the season, and they have nowhere else to turn. All of these starters have made at least 2 starts so far, are built up to about 50 pitches at this point, and these guys are still waiting to get things going, ready to get the ignition really firing for the start of their year. As we get closer and closer to the season, 2 big hot topics continue to come up here in this area, and that's for pending free agents with Pete Alonso on the Mets and Juan Soto on the New York Yankees. Fans keep asking on social media, calling into radio stations with concerns, worried, oh, this is going to be our last year with our guy if you're a Met fan, or in the Yankees case, this is a one-and-done spot. To me, I'm not even thinking about that. I'm not even worrying about that, because to me that takes away from the enjoyment of what this season could be. The enjoyment of that you do have a stud on your team that's going to put up monstrous numbers. See, spring is supposed to be the time for optimism. Spring is supposed to be the time of hope and something to look forward to in baseball. Not being so overly concerned that, oh, my guy's going to be a free agent at the end of the year. Yeah, I was disappointed 2 years ago when I get to opening day for the Yankees at the home opener, and they report that Aaron Judge and the Yankees had not come to terms on a long-term contract extension before the start of the season. But I didn't let it sit over my mind the entire year. I just said, all right, deal with it at the end of the year. I think Judge will be a Yankee long-term, and just enjoyed that year. I enjoyed him hitting those 62 bombs that year and wasn't thinking about his free agency until they got to the off season. And that's the same mindset you have to have if you're a Yankee fan for Soto. That's the same mindset you have to have if you're a Met fan for Alonso. Don't be too concerned about losing this guy and just be concerned about this year. If things fall apart for you, especially in the Mets case, as they didn't do a lot to upgrade their pitching staff this offseason and are already dealing with the injury to Kodai Senga. If things fall apart, then you possibly worry, is this the end of Alonso's time as a Met? Because he could become a trade candidate. But for now, just look forward to the season. Have some hope, have some optimism, and try to enjoy what we all hope is going to be a very fun, very exciting baseball season, especially in this area. And that, my friends, was Keeping It Sports with M3 for Monday, March 4th, 2024. Everyone, please have a great night. Have a fun, safe, happy, healthy week. You got one life, people. You might as well live it up. And I'll talk to you all again, same time next week. Until then, peace.
We have to go. Good night, everybody.
I have had enough of you!
Thank you for all the fun. Thank you. Hey, shut up, will ya?
I don't want to see you, I don't want to hear you, and I don't want to smell you. Now leave. I'll be back.